Okay, welcome to another discussion, Lunch and Learn. The topic today is the title is the power of the truth. Now, the truth is, excuse me, I didn't mean to a pun. Um, the truth is, I debated a little bit with exactly how to make the title. And at first, I thought the power of telling the truth, but I think that's a bit misleading because the idea is that there's an intrinsic value to the truth, not in telling the truth, but the truth itself. There's a certain intrinsic value, absolute value of the truth itself. Then I thought, well, maybe the reward of the truth or telling the truth. That's also misleading because, that's kind of like George Washington and the cherry tree. You tell the truth, you get some kind of reward. But if there's an intrinsic value to the truth, then we don't need a reward. The reward is the truth itself. And so then I came up with a question just today. I said, well, what is truth? Anybody want to take a stab at trying to define it? I admit I looked it up. I looked it up in the dictionary. And so I came across there's a site called dictionary.com, and they say like this: the true or actual state of a matter. Okay, this sounds pretty straightforward. And Merriam-Webster dictionary says the body of real things, events, and facts. Okay, it sounds both of those are pretty accurate. The truth, we know what truth is. It's the actual or true state, the real. But then both of them came with another definition, which I find a little bit misleading or not quite accurate. I don't want to say it's not the truth, but again, it's misleading. Dictionary.com said agreement with a standard. Agreement with a standard. And Merriam-Webster goes a little bit further. A judgment, proposition, or idea that is true or accepted as true. What's the problem with these two second definitions? They're not absolute. There has to be a source of truth. It can't be dependent on human instinct or human knowledge or human development and appreciation standards. What absolute truth is something that doesn't change. And there's no such thing as a human being that doesn't change. We change, our outlook changes, our thoughts change, our standards change. So what is truth? If we're talking about absolute truth, what is absolute truth? And if we're talking about the power of the truth, so where does the strength, that power of absolute strength come from? And the only possible explanation is it has to come from something higher than the human being. We're not going to define what that higher power is, but we can all accept, or we can divert from what it is, the word to figure out what it is. Why something higher? There's a story that I'm not quite sure, in fact, I'm quite sure that it's not true. But they say that in one of the ancient civilizations, I think the story says Greece, that when people would get old, their oldest son would take them out to the field, leave them there to die. That was kind of an accepted practice until one of the leaders about to take his elderly father out to the field, and his son comes running up and says, Daddy, Daddy, can I come with you? So, why? Why do you want to come with me? So when you get old, I know what to do. And with that, the practice stopped. In other words, what was accepted as a standard was no longer accepted. That's certainly the absolute truth. If we look at other things like the United Nations, the International Court of Justice, that's certainly not absolute truth. What is the absolute truth? We can learn from next week's um, portion, the portion of Korach. Korach led a rebellion against Moses, and the famous story that Moses tried um, to envelop him, to accept him, to let him lead him into accepting the truth. In the end, it was to no avail, and the earth opened up and swallowed Korach and the others who were rebelling with him. The story is that one of the rabbis mentioned in the Torah said, I came to that place and I put my ear to the crevice where it had been swallowed, and I heard Moshe Emet v'Torato Emet. Moses is truth and the Torah is truth. And this is really the key to understanding what truth is. Moses is true. Why is Moses true? Because he revealed the Torah. He didn't give anything of himself. He was the conduit to passing the Torah from upstairs down to this earth. So that's the story of Koach Moshe Emet or Torah Emet. Moses is truth, Torah is truth. And why is it truth? Because it's absolute. It doesn't change. It adapts. When 3,300 years ago, we didn't have cars, we didn't have airplanes, we didn't have electricity, we didn't have genetic testing. But the Torah itself and the principles that laid down are absolute. They don't change. The Rabbi said once that diplomacy, something not word for word, but diplomacy is a nice way of telling lies. You have the truth, and you have the opposite of the truth. And there's a saying that even if you don't tell the truth, don't tell a lie. So there's a gray area. But there is such a thing as truth. A number of years ago, I'm talking many years ago, like 50 years ago, maybe even more, there was a survey done in America of who is trusted by the general public. And if I remember correctly, number one and number two were clergy and teachers. That may not hold today, but 50 years ago, I think there was more respect and appreciation of both clergy and teachers. When we've seen so many instances of both destroying their positions. Somewhere in the middle were lawyers. And the two lowest on the survey were journalists and politicians. I'm not sure which one was the lowest and which one was the less. That probably tells a pretty accurate way of how most people relate today. It's very, very difficult, certainly in any kind of media, to get to the truth. So in any case, how do we get to the truth? And we can find the path in this week's portion, Shalach Lecha. The story is that Moses sends out 12, they're called spies, but he doesn't really call them spies. He tells them to go out and journey through the land of Israel, see what's there, how to come back with a report. Today you go and you take a few pictures, and you come back with the pictures, or you send them over YouTube, and you know immediately. Then they had to go out and come back with a report. The report is that 10 of the journey takers, come back with a negative report. They say they're pessimistic. There's no way we can do it. They're too powerful. It's not feasible. We're too limited in our ability. By the way, despite the fact that they come back with a negative report, Rashi says ksherim hayu from the word kosher. How were the spies kosher? Because before they told the lie, they came with the truth. They said Eretz Yisrael is good. The fruit is good. It's a good place flowing with milk and honey. So, and actually, the desire to enter Eretz Yisrael was already planted by the report of the 10 negative spies. So that's to their credit. It took another 40 years, as we know, for it to manifest itself. But it comes through with the first report. So that's the 10 of the spies, except for Joshua and Caleb. And here's something interesting. Caleb says like this. Numbers 13:30 says, "We shall surely ascend and take possession of it, for we can surely do it." The Hebrew is Yechol Nuchal, from the word Yechol. Yechol means we can. Yechol, we can. We can do the Chol. Excuse me? Okay, we can do it. It's a double a double usage of the same word. Yachol nuchal. We can. So it's very forceful, full of confidence. That's why he says we shall surely ascend. The question is, where did Kalev get it from? What was the difference between Kalev and the other 10 spies? And so we go a little bit further in the portion, and it says like this: They, that's the spies, went up in the south, and he came to Hebron. Well, wait a minute. We said they came up from the south, but he came to Hebron. Are we talking about them or he? And Rashi learns from this. That's in the mentioned in the Gemara, that when Kalev came into Eretz Yisrael, he diverted. He went to Hebron, Ma'arat HaMachpelah. Ma'arat HaMachpelah is the resting place of the patriarchs and matriarchs. And what did he do there? He prayed. But there is an accepted practice of praying at the grave sites of tzaddikim. That's exactly what Kalev did. And when Kalev came back, he came back from this holy place. He came back with an attachment to the truth. And so therefore, when the spies started giving their negative report, he said, no, it's not true at all. I know the truth because I was there. I got the power for it. I got the strength by having been there. And so he was connected to the truth. So this is the story of Kalev. What do we learn from Kalev's story? The Rabbi gives us an important lesson. The Rabbi says, very often we're overtaken by doubt. We're not sure. We're afraid to fail. We're afraid to go against the norm, against the crowd. A little voice inside us says, no, this is too much. I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't succeed. I'm going to fail. Comes along the little voice or the strong voice of Kalev and says, I can. I know I can. I can do it. I have faith in myself. I have the strength. I have the ability. I have the power. Because we have to believe, the Rabbi says, in what we're doing. We have to put our trust in God, know which way we're going, and then go. And the third Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek, once said, think good and it will be good. As soon as we give ourselves a positive approach, a positive outlook, we have strengths that sometimes we don't even realize that we have. The idea of don't being afraid, by the way, somebody once said that don't be afraid of making mistakes. Okay, you make a mistake, big deal. If you're right 55% of the time, you can make $1 million in the stock market. You don't have to be 100%, even 90%. 55%, and you can make $1 million in the stock market. I don't know, I never tried it, but it's an interesting approach. How does this manifest itself? Um, one of the shluchim, Rav Gordon, Yeshua Gordon, when he came to California, so like 30 or 40 years ago, he said, if I go to people and I say, I'm setting up a Beth Chabad, will you help me? They'll say, we don't need you. You can't do it. Not here. You're going to fail. So he said, I have a different approach. I'm not going to ask them for money. I'm not going to ask them. I'm going to ask for their advice. So I went and I asked the people, well, what's your opinion? What is your advice? What should I do? And they said, you can't do it. You're going to fail. It's impossible. So in other words, it doesn't matter what his approach was. You have to deal with so he went ahead anyway, and very, very successful. In a number of years ago, over 20 years ago, I was sent from work to San Diego. And there I met somebody named Gedalia. And he lived in San Diego, but his children were getting to the age of education. So he said, and we need to go to a place with better education. He decided Chicago. He worked something with movies or television, I don't know exactly what. And there was a company in Chicago looking for somebody with his skills. So he called up the secretary to make an appointment for the interview. And he said, I have to know in advance because I'm coming from San Diego. And the secretary says, what? Are you crazy? San Diego is springtime all year round. Why leave San Diego to come to Chicago, which is the worst winter weather imaginable? So what's he going to say? I'm coming for the education because the education is better. Well, there's very good cultural events and museums and all kinds of excuses or justifications. Okay. So they made an appointment to say, what's your name? And he said, Gedalia, whatever his last name was, Gedalia Cohen. Listen. And okay, very good. And he said, excuse me for asking, but this is the first time in my life that when I said my name is Gedalia, they said the person said, what? What kind of name is that? How do you spell it? What is that? And she said, oh, no, my uncle is Gedalia. I said, oh, you're Jewish? Oh, yeah, sure. They started talking. And how long you been in Chicago? Because you came from Memphis. You came from Memphis. Memphis is a really nice place. Why did you leave Memphis? She said, we left Memphis for the education. That what he was afraid to say, she had already done. When you know the truth, don't be afraid of the truth. Go and say it. Do it. Follow it. Going on the same path and speaking of truth, there's a book called Shmirat HaLashon, which literally means guarding your tongue. It's all about what's called Lashon Hara, which is gossip, slander. One of the chapters in the book explains something very interesting. We know that in slander and gossip, there are three parties. There is the slanderer, who speaks ill of somebody. There's the person who listens. And then there's the third party who's not even aware of what's going on. Hopefully he's not aware. Sometimes he is, and it can be very painful. So what the book says is that everybody has a certain kind of merit towards him. And when the slanderer speaks ill of somebody and the other one listens, the merits that they have are transferred to the third party. It's an interesting concept, and I looked into it a little bit, and I see that there's really quite a lot of sources in Jewish mysticism that talk about it and come to the same conclusion. Why do I bring this up? If we want to look for lies, we don't have to look very far. We know the lies that are being told about Israel, the slander of Israel, the rampant anti-Semitism that the Jews run the world, and the Jews are eating babies, and the genocide, and all those lies. But today, with all those lies, these the benefits are being transferred to Israel and to Am Yisrael. And so, in other words, the truth is giving a certain inherent strength to all of the Jewish people and to Israel. So, as we're talking about truth and lies, I wanted to mention that because it is very disturbing and very disconcerting. Sometimes it can be very dangerous. There are places where people are afraid to go out. But because there is an inherent truth, an absolute truth, all those lies and the slander, the hatred, and everything else, that in Hebrew you say, "Ein lo reglayim," it doesn't have a feet, it's not grounded. All of the truth, the elements of the truth, are ultimately going to be passed to the Jewish nation. And so I don't know how this very difficult period is going to end, how it's going to pass. But I am confident that in the end, the truth will prevail, and there will be only good things that for the state of Israel and for the Jewish people. And so when we talk about the power of truth, it all funnels down through all the things we mentioned, through Kalev, through Korach, through the Torah, through all kinds of standards and everything else. It funnels down into something very real, something very actual for today. And that is that the truth will prevail. The truth that right now the lies of weakening us. In the end, those same lies will be turned upside down and will give us the ultimate strength to overcome them and bring the full and final redemption. So, if anybody wants to add something, ask questions, I'm very happy. Yes, Richard?
Yeah, it's funny. As you were talking for these last 25 minutes, I was thinking if truth had a color, it would be you. It would be white. Your beard, your shirt, the talit. You have white in the Israeli flag. White in many things in Israel. So, if truth had a color, I think it would be white.
Well, it is. Look, I think it's accepted all over the world that a bride at the wedding comes
Sure.
in white. Purity, purity. And it's true. The talit is white. Interesting about the talit, we wrap ourselves in the talit. Why? Because the talit, which is white, represents chesed. Chesed is kindness, loving kindness, warmth, embracing. And so when we daven and we put the talit over us, we're actually embracing ourselves in kindness, but not completely, because the tefillin on the head still has to be exposed a little bit. Why? Tefillin represents strength. And so as much as we want to envelop ourselves with kindness, Well, we can't cancel out the strength. The kindness comes through strength. We have to have both. That's an interesting observation. Right? There's an expression, right? A white lie. A white lie is, it's a kind of in the middle. We never say a black lie or black truth, white truth. But sure, white is the opposite
I don't.
of
I don't.
darkness.
One more comment, but how do you say
Yes.
white in Hebrew? Isn't it like the first and last letter of the alphabet? Completeness.
No, no, Levan is it, but emet, that's a very good point. Thank you for bringing it
Okay,
up.
that's what I was thinking.
Truth in Hebrew is emet.
Oh, truth, not white. That's right.
Right. And the first letter in the alphabet is Aleph. The last is Tav. So it encompasses the whole alphabet.
And
There's an important in mystical Judaism that the letters give the substance of an object. For example, a stone is called Evan. Now Evan doesn't appear in the 10. It says God says that God said let there be light. God said it doesn't. You say Evan, but there's a combination of letters so that the word Evan, the letters for Evan, actually give life and substance to the stone. And so Emet is the same. We have the Aleph at the beginning, the Tuf at the end, so it's all encompassing. And then you have the Mem, which is the middle, so that it's a complete completeness. I don't know what you call it. That's absolute.
the truth, I
Truth.
guess.
That's really truth. The
Thanks.
absolute truth. Right, right. Okay, anyone else? Okay, thank you all for joining. And let's hope that that we not only realize the truth, but we have the strength to uphold the truth, the strength to know what's the truth, the strength, as the Rabbi says, to accept our path and move forward. And let us hope that all the truth manifests itself very, very soon. Amen.
Amen.
All the best. All the
Amen.
best. All the best.
Thank you,
Everybody
Rabbi.
should.
Thanks much.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Rabbi.
all.
Thank
you,
Rabbi.
Feel good. And we say, Besorot Tovot, good tidings. All the best.
All the best, Rabbi. Thank you.
All the best.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.